Chapter 34. Angelique divided. The roadway seemed suspended in an eerie stillness. To Angelique, the world seemed to move in slow motion, the clamor of voices becoming a distant murmur, almost surreal. Every heartbeat, every breath seemed amplified in her ears. The familiar faces of her comrades, now painted with uncertainty and betrayal. The whisper of a fabric against leather, the subtle shuffling of boots, even the rhythmic thud of her own heartbeat. Her pistols felt cold and heavy in her hands as tension mounted to an unbearable climax. She looked on, her gaze rigid and unwavering, as the familiar faces of those she had trained with, laughed with, fought alongside with, were now distorted by mistrust and treachery. Cameron and Ken, two she had come to consider as brothers, made their allegiances clear in seconds, standing shoulder to shoulder with Angelique against an oncoming storm. Jeff's hesitation was evident. His weapon hung loosely in his grip, a reflection of his inner turmoil. Every fiber of Angelique's being was attuned to the unfolding chaos. As orders were barked and ultimatums hurled, she realized that every relationship, every bond was precariously balanced on a knife's edge. The next moment could shatter them all. Jeff, on the other hand, seemed caught in a tumult of emotions. His weapon hung hesitantly by his side, his face a storm of confusion and indecision. Through it all, orders were barked, fingers pointed, and ultimatums given. Loyalties were being tested, and the room was divided. Angelique, pistols in hand, took it all in, wondering how they had reached this breaking point and what would come next. How far is this going to go, she asked herself, not wanting to get into a firefight with those she once served beside. Struggling with the situation, Jeff's mind raced and his emotions ran high. Visions of his past service with Angelique swirled with visions of the practical consequences of turning against the agency. Then it became clear to him that there were only two real choices: be hunted as a criminal or praised as a hero. Suddenly, a hatred for Angelique for putting him in this position bubbled up inside him. The hatred grew faster and faster as the seconds ticked by, until Jeff's path became clear to him. Raising his weapon once more, he watched through the optics as the red dot moved across the pavement. With his finger planted firmly on the trigger, by the time the dot reached Angelique's boot, Jeff was ready to fire. He watched as the red dot ran the length of her leg and across her finely tuned abs and settled between her breasts. With his trigger already in motion to send its fury upon her, Jeff knew it would all be over within a second. Stunned by the rifle fire, the agent stopped demanding that the others drop their weapons. Each looked to see where the shot had come from and who had been hit by it. All eyes turned toward Angelique. Standing with both 45s facing down overwhelming odds, Angelique felt lucky that she wasn't standing alone facing down the Homeland Security agents. She was thankful to see three men in the team that she had once trusted with her life. The one thing she wanted now was to get away with Ken, Cameron, Jeff, and her family, then sort this out with Homeland Security. Had it not been for Cameron, Ken, and Jeff on the team, well, the odds of 8 against 1 didn't seem possible. Now, with 4 against 5, she stood, with restored confidence. Angelique didn't clearly see Jeff positioned to the rear just behind Ken, as her attention focused primarily on Jonathan. "Bring out my parents, and I will be on my way," she shouted out over the multitude of demands being thrown around, most of which were demanding that others put down their weapons. Movement just on the edge of her vision alerted Angelique's instincts to take control, and one of her 45s moved to meet the possible threat. In a situation like this, many things that can be considered threats aren't, but this wasn't the time for mistakes. A ghostly hush had fallen over the scene. Angelique's sharp reflexes had her pivoting toward the unexpected threat, a betrayal materializing in slow motion before her eyes. Jeff had stepped away from their ad hoc alliance, weapon raising, barrel slowly aligning with her as the target. Time seemed to splinter into fragments as she swung her own weapon toward him. The name Jeff was a strangled shout in her throat as her finger contracted around the trigger of her Colt 1911. Yet, her vocal plea was swallowed by the dissonant roar of a gunshot, a sound that seemed to ripple through the very air, causing the world to hold its breath in shocked stillness. Angelique, pulse thundering in her ears, observed Jeff's form as it shuddered once before gradually yielding to gravity. Her pistols, still firmly gripped, bore silent testimony to the action that had unfolded amid the strange quiet. Her eyes, locked on the collapsing figure of her one-time ally, harbored a tempest of emotions: betrayal, sorrow, and a gnawing emptiness. The standoff on the road, with its idle, wide-eyed observers in their halted vehicles, hung precariously on the precipice of turmoil. Her comrades, who'd witnessed the split-second decision, remained motionless, tension knotting the atmosphere. Looking back once more at the vehicle she had dismissed earlier, Angelique's eyes locked on the smoking rifle that had fired the shot saving her life. Attached to the rifle, resting over the side view mirror, was an arm covered in tattoos. She could see that the man inside was wearing an older woodland military uniform, with the sleeves rolled up to his large biceps. As he gave her an upward nod, again Angelique felt that he was no threat to her and quickly focused back on what she had come there to do. Pointing both of her pistols at Jonathan, she gave her demands, which were heard by all. "Bring out my parents." "Sorry, babe, can't do that. They are going with me." This was a side Angelique had never seen of the man, a side she hadn't believed was possible. Had he been playing her this entire time, she thought. "You are now an accessory to the murder of a federal officer. All of you are." Jonathan delivered the news. "Okay, this is over," said Angelique, closing the distance between her and Jonathan, keeping one pistol on him and raising the other above her head. As she brought it down upon his temple, the last thing he heard before unconsciousness was, "Jonathan, you're fired." Ken caught Jonathan, quickly moving him to the ground just off the pavement, and collected his weapon, sliding it into his vest. "I think we all have had enough for one day, don't you guys?" Ken asked. He said the name of each person remaining in the detail as he finished taking the pistol away. With their weapons still trained on Angelique and her new team, the people in the detail look around for guidance. Ken, their squad leader, had joined with the person they were after. One by one, the four of them slowly lowered their weapons. Seeing that she would have no further resistance, Angelique holstered her pistols. She could see that Ken was still struggling with his decisions, but with only her parents' safety on her mind, it would have to wait. Angelique took 2 steps, reached out for a door handle, and opened the door to the black beast that was holding her parents inside. Looking in to where she expected the 2 of them to be, she found nothing but empty seats. "Where are they?" she demanded as she turned back to Ken. "Anne, they're not here," Ken replied, turning toward the forest and avoiding eye contact. "Then take me to where they are." Angelique couldn't believe that she hadn't seen a 3rd vehicle earlier. After walking over to Ken and stopping alongside him, she stood, letting her body language repeat the question. "Anne, I'm truly sorry, but I don't know," Ken said with true feeling in his voice. He hung his head. "They will stick to the main roads, and there is only one way east from here," said Angelique. "They couldn't have got far. Let's go." Ken spotted Cameron looking off in the distance. "What is it?" Ken asked. Then Ken saw them sitting on top of the hill, white SUVs with a blue dot on the hood. "Shit, what are they doing here?" Sir Ken asked Cameron, not expecting an answer. "Anne, we have got to go now." Ken pointed at the convoy of white vehicles coming over the hill. Angelique instantly knew who they were from years of service, and the strategist in her fought against the desire to reach her parents. "You men, lay your weapons down and run," she ordered those who had shown their unwillingness to pick a side. Without being told twice, as they watched her hand rest on the pistol secured to her side, they did as she asked. Todd had remained silent since his strange encounter at what would have been an unbelievable traffic stop on any typical day. Now, he swiftly brought his rifle back inside the truck's cab from where it had rested on the outside mirror. While spotting a familiar vehicle in the distance, instincts kicked in, prompting him to reverse his route. Given the constricted width of the road, making the massive truck do a U-turn proved a bit cumbersome. While he wrestled with the steering wheel, his gaze remained fixed on the blonde directing the dark SUV's positioning strategically across the asphalt. Finally pointing his truck back from whence he came, Todd glimpsed Angelique, Ken and Cameron, taking defensive stances by the SUVs via his rearview mirror. "They're making a grave mistake," he murmured, his foot pressing firmly on the accelerator, a grimace forming as the weight of the situation set in. "Stick close," Angelique rasped to Cameron and Ken, her gaze intense as they readied themselves for the imminent onslaught. No sooner had they taken cover than the deafening rattle of gunfire exploded around them. The suddenness and ferocity of the assault caught them off guard. Whizzing bullets transformed their SUV into a sieve, perforating the metal with alarming speed. Angelique, leveraging her seasoned instincts, quickly realized that the thin metal of the car doors would offer scant protection. Locking eyes with her companions, she signaled with swift hand gestures, directing them to use the sturdier engine block for shelter. Recognizing the tactic, Cameron and Ken nodded in acknowledgement and swiftly positioned themselves accordingly. With a swift, fluid motion, Angelique slid to the ground, rolling beneath the vehicle, taking their enemies by surprise. Methodically, she targeted the feet and tires of the approaching vehicles, squeezing off a round with each heartbeat. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, punctuated by the sharp clang of ricocheting bullets. Once her surprise attack concluded, she scrambled back to the cover of the front tire. To her dismay, the relentless gunfire had kicked up shards of asphalt, embedding splinters into her skin. Regret filled her for a moment, realizing her risky maneuver might have been ill-advised. But with the rear choked with disabled vehicles and terrified civilians, retreat was not an option. They were cornered, and their only way out was to fight. As the chorus of bullets seemed to reach a climax, Angelique's thoughts raced faster than her heartbeats. The woods seemed like a distant sanctuary, a sliver of hope in a haze of danger. But getting there meant braving an open sprint, exposed to a hail of gunfire. Breathing in sharply, she caught the eyes of her comrades, and in that split second, they shared an unspoken understanding, a collective agreement to take the odds head-on as they readied themselves. Angelique could feel the weight of every bullet, every magazine, every ounce of adrenaline coursing through her. Her muscles readied, every fiber of her being focused on the path to the woods. She turned to her comrades, her eyes resolute. With a firm nod, she barked her orders, "Go! Go! Go!" The world seemed to move in slow motion as they bolted from their cover, their feet pounding the asphalt in unison, their shadows stretching towards the sanctuary of the woods. Each step was a mix of dread and hope, and they were driven by the need to survive. Angelique's voice cut sharply through the air, undaunted by the surrounding chaos. As she started her sprint, the sudden scream of tires against the road momentarily drowned out the ongoing gunfire. A moment of confusion gripped her, but when she spotted the truck barreling towards them, recognition set in. That was the vehicle of the man who'd saved her life. With a swift change in direction, Angelique bolted towards the truck. Without any need for communication, Ken and Cameron read the situation and pivoted, mirroring her move. Every second mattered, and crossing the open terrain was a risk none of them were willing to take. Every footstep and breath magnified as they raced towards the one chance they had at survival. Angelique didn't slow down. She used her momentum to carry her into the back of the truck. She landed one foot on the bumper, then flew through the air and into the truck bed. She was followed by Cameron and then Ken, who did the same, along with letting out sounds of pain as they landed. Before the three had made contact, Todd's foot had already stomped on the accelerator pedal, propelling the truck forward once again, this time with extra cargo. With an impressive show of force, the truck jolted ahead, its engine roaring in defiance. The tires kicked up gravel, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. It seemed like they had traveled miles in just a few heartbeats, with the landscape of the Ozarks unfolding before them. Todd's sharp eyes scanned the environment as he sought out a suitable spot, away from prying eyes, to regroup and take stock. He turned onto a narrow gravel road that snaked its way through the rugged terrain. Trees loomed overhead, casting dappled shadows on the path. At last, finding a shaded, hidden alcove, he brought the truck to a slow, rumbling halt. The quiet of the forest enveloped them, broken only by the chirping of birds and the distant hum of the truck's engine cooling down. The rear of the truck moved slightly as Angelique, cautious, lifted herself to peek over the edge. When Todd emerged from the driver's side, Angelique's eyes widened slightly. His towering stature, coupled with a military-cut hairstyle and physique that seemed sculpted from rock, gave him the appearance of a real-life action figure. He approached with a defined gait, nodding to Angelique in acknowledgement. "Looks like that is twice today you have saved my ass. Got a name?" she asked. Feeling as if nothing could be trusted lately, Angelique held one of her 45s just out of sight. "Master Sergeant Todd Myers, recently retired, and you?" He held a 9mm H&K pistol behind him and stood at parade rest while he addressed his new passengers. "Angelique Carringer, Homeland Security." Hearing what Angelique said, Todd slowly cocked the pistol carefully so that it would create little noise. Seeing the reflection of his actions in the paint on the door, Angelique quickly responded, "Don't worry. I believe we have just been fired." Feeling that the man could have just let them die, she relaxed her body language and stood. She helped Cameron up and holstered her pistol. "Looks as if you might be getting ready for something," she said, admiring the hastily loaded ammunition and weapons covering the bed on which they had landed. "I ran into a little problem this morning," Todd replied, still not willing to let down his guard to the strangers. "Guess you could say we all have. Didn't get up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. Apparently I woke in the wrong bed instead." Making an attempt to ease things a little, Angelique put on a smile. "What was all that back there?" Todd asked while raising his chin in the general direction of the firefight. "Well, these guys and the others picked my parents up from their home and I wanted them back." Stepping on the side rail of the truck as she made her way out of the bed, Angelique thought of how wrong it was to step with boots on the shiny black paint. Looking over and seeing where a number of bullets had made contact, she didn't give it another thought. The other was, well, I really don't have an answer for that. Angelique looked over to Ken as he came alongside her. "How about it, Ken? You know what that was?" she asked, as if he might have been holding something back. "No, they weren't with us," Ken answered while looking at her, and then back to Todd. The expression on Ken's face begged her to believe him. "I do." Todd let them off the hook. "You two don't know?" He couldn't believe they wouldn't know. "How do you not? It has even been announced on the radio all morning." "What has?" Angelique asked. Now very interested in what Todd had to say, Angelique gave him all of her attention, even as Cameron, walking strangely, made his way over to them. "I think one of the many rifles I landed on molested me," Cameron said as he groaned and rubbed his rear. Though he irritated her, Angelique could always count on Cameron to make her laugh inside, even if the others couldn't tell. "Carry on, Master Sergeant," Angelique said, seemingly dismissing Cameron's remarks. "The UN personnel are going around confiscating firearms," Todd said. Not knowing quite what to say, the three of them looked at one another in disbelief. "Is that why you're running around with a truck full of them? Because you heard it on the radio?" Angelique asked. Had she not just been in a firefight with them, she would have thought it a prank some DJ was doing to get ratings. "No, I watched as they raided my neighbor's house, while on my morning run," Todd replied. "After that, I made my way back home through the woods and threw what I could in the back of my truck." Turning his head to the side and looking up as if he had just remembered something, Todd blurted out, "Damn, I left my new tumbler on." "What?" Ken asked, not able to figure out how his brass cleaning machine tied in. "Nothing. I killed 3 and left the 4th unconscious on my garage floor. Damn, I can't believe I did that." Todd let his hands fall to his side and relaxed his body while still holding his pistol. "Hey man, you did what you had to do," Cameron responded, shaking his head in approval. "What? No, I just got it in and now I won't get to use it. This sucks." Neither Angelique nor the 2 men standing beside her followed along. Instead, they thought it best to move the conversation forward. "Where are you headed now, Master Sergeant?" Angelique felt that redirecting the conversation was the best move to make. With his hands on his waist, Todd shrugged and replied, "No clue, hadn't planned on killing 4 people today and going on the run with most of my weapons." Looking back into the truck bed, Cameron was overcome with one question. There were more? The remark was met by a sharp elbow jab to the ribs from Angelique, followed up with a look that told him to pull it together before she responded to Todd. "As much as I want to run after those who have my parents," Angelique said, then paused to collect her thoughts before she continued, "we need to head for Jefferson City." "What's there?" Todd asked. He was already interested, mostly due to not having any plans ready. At this point, he needed a plan. "Karnik." As she said his name, Angelique felt as if the world were forcing them together.